The twin suns of Terran's Reach were low in the sky, casting long amber shadows that stretched across the rows of grain, like fingers reaching for something they could never touch. The heat had settled into a dry hum, buzzing in the stalks, hanging over Kale's farmland like a second skin. He squinted toward the northern fields, cursing under his breath as he noticed the irrigation line sagging again, third time this week. A split in the main hose, probably. He should have replaced the whole thing last season, but he'd been hoping the patch jobs would hold. They, HADN single quotes T.tools in hand, he trudged through the field, boots kicking up dust that clung to the sweat on his legs. The land was dry, even for this time of year. Something felt off in the way the wind moved, not sharp or angry, just distracted. Like it was watching. He reached the edge of the property where the fence slanted slightly, one post already leaning from the last storm. That's when he saw her. She was standing or trying to. Her knees trembled, body swaying like a stalk of brittle grass. Her skin was a muted green, soft and uneven like moss under sunlight. Her clothes hung in tatters, barely more than rags clinging to bone. Her eyes, too large for her thin face, were a deep amber that caught the light and held it like molten glass. She didn't look up until he was only a few steps away. He stopped short, instincts flaring from an old life he didn't talk about anymore. But she didn't move to run. Instead, her legs folded under her, and she dropped to her knees in the sheaves. Dirt like something inside had given out. "Please," she said, her voice cracked and raw. "I'll work. Just so my stomach stops hurting." Kale's fingers tightened around the wrench in his hand. He looked her over, really looked, and what he saw wasn't just hunger. It was restraint. She wasn't begging. She wasn't pleading. She was offering. Whatever pride she had left, she was clinging to it with every ounce of strength she still had. He could have walked away. It would have been safer, easier, but the war had taught him what it meant to see someone as less. And he'd promised himself if he ever found peace, he wouldn't do that again. He knelt slowly and said, "When did you last eat?" Her eyes darted to his, surprised by the question. 2 days ago, maybe 3. There was a stream, some roots. But it wasn't enough. He nodded once, then stood. "Come on. Food and water first. The work can wait." She hesitated then, forced herself to stand, legs shaking beneath her. She followed him down the dusty path, and he pretended not to notice when she stumbled. Once inside the farmhouse, he handed her a cup of water. She cradled it with both hands like it might disappear. Then he set a plate of bread and root stew in front of her. She didn't devour it like he expected. She ate slowly, carefully, like each bite needed permission. Her eyes stayed low, but not from shame, more like reverence. When she finished, he offered her the spare room. She looked toward it, then shook her head. "The barn is fine," she said softly. "You sure? I just need to earn my place." Later. That night, as the wind rustled the rafters and the stars blinked overhead, Kale stood at the window, watching the silhouette of the barn through the shadows. He didn't know who she was, but something told him this was only the beginning. The morning light crept across the farm in slow amber streaks, crawling over the rooftops and through the tall grain like a second sunrise after the twin suns of Terran's Reach had already claimed the sky. Kale rolled out of bed before the alarm. Chirped. Habit. Not from farming, but from the war, an instinct you never quite unlearn. The need to move before the world decided you were too slow to matter. He pulled on his boots and headed for the kitchen, expecting silence. Instead, he heard a dull, rhythmic sound echoing through the floorboards. Metal on metal, sharp, purposeful, like someone meant to be heard. He stepped outside and blinked against the brightness. Down near the fence line, where the eastern post had started to sag, the girl was working. She stood with her back to him, hammer in hand, her moss-colored skin damp with morning sweat. She'd tied her ragged shirt into something resembling function, and her hair, tangled and wild the night before, was now pulled into a loose knot at the base of her neck. A few strands stuck to her cheeks, and her arms moved in precise, practiced strikes. Each blow of the hammer landed clean. He watched her for a moment, unsure what surprised him more, that she'd already found the damage, or that she was fixing it without being asked. "You don't have to do that," he called out, walking toward her. She didn't look up. "I told you," she said. "I'll work." "I meant it. Food first. Rest." This time she met his gaze, amber eyes hard and clear. "This is how I rest." He didn't argue. There was something in her tone that didn't leave room for kindness without purpose. She wasn't rebuilding the fence for him. She was rebuilding something inside herself. They worked in silence for a while. She mended 2 other spots before noon, each one faster than the last. Kale found himself slowing down just to watch. Not because of attraction, not yet, but because she moved with that rare certainty of someone who had been taught labor not as survival, but as identity. At lunch, he brought out 2 bowls of stew, and they sat under the shade of the grain tower. She ate without words, eyes always scanning. Not out of fear, Kale realized, but calculation. She was weighing everything. "What's your name?" he asked finally. She hesitated, spoon halfway to her mouth. "Lira. That short for something?" "It was once," she said. "Not anymore." He didn't press. Whatever past she carried, she wore it like armor, light enough to move in, but thick enough to block every question. In the afternoon, as the temperature climbed, Kale worked on the water drums while Lira weeded the crop rows with startling precision. She found vines he'd missed for weeks, root structures buried deep that could have killed entire patches of wheat. When he asked how she spotted them, she shrugged. "I was taught to feel where something doesn't belong." The words sat heavy in the air. She didn't mean just weeds. That night, Kale brought her clean clothes from storage, plain but soft. She took them with a quiet nod. He tried again to offer the guest room. She refused. "I sleep where I won't forget why I'm here," she said. He almost asked what she meant by that, almost. But the look in her eyes wasn't a warning. It was a wound, and he wasn't ready to reopen it for her. Not yet. 3 days passed. Each morning, Lira rose before dawn. She cleaned, repaired, even organized his supply shed without being asked. She handled his livestock with a gentleness that surprised them both. Once he found her humming to the young bramble goats, and they responded by laying at her feet. Still, she slept in the barn. Still, she never asked for more than food. One evening, after a long day reinforcing the southern wall, Kale brought out a bottle of fermented root wine. He poured them both a cup and motioned toward the porch. Lira sipped carefully. "This tastes like tree bark." "It is," he said with a grin. She gave the ghost of a laugh. Soft, short, but real. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars creep into the darkening sky. Finally, Kale said, "You're not from around here." "I'm not from anywhere anymore." "Planet?" She stared at the horizon. "Lira, the outer fringe, not marked on most trade maps." "Never heard of it." "You wouldn't have. It's gone." He turned toward her, something cold settling in his chest. "Gone?" Glastorm wiped the valley out. "Radiation from an old mining core. They woke up again. My village lasted until the second sun cycle. After that, people scattered, stopped trusting each other. Some begged the humans for help. Most were turned away. And you?" Her voice thinned. "I walked." The image hit him hard. Her, alone, crossing lightless terrain. Ships passing overhead, too high to notice or care. "Why here?" he asked. "Because you gave me water before I asked," she whispered, "and bread before I earned it." They didn't say much more after that. But something changed in the way she looked at him, less guarded, more curious. Like maybe, just maybe, he was not what she feared. Later that night, Kale stood again at his window, watching the barn through the shadows. He saw her silhouette moving, not pacing, but shaping something. Her hands outstretched, weaving in the air. Faint light glowed between her palms, like strands of web-catching starlight. He blinked. It was gone. He almost opened the door. Almost. But instead, he stepped back from the window and let her be. Because something told him she wasn't just here to work his fields. The sky cracked just after midnight. No thunder. Just a sharp burst of white across the stars, too sudden for lightning, too silent for ships. Kale shot up in bed, the soundless flash still dancing on the inside of his eyelids. The wind howled. Next, unnatural and fast, like it had forgotten which direction it was supposed to blow. The farmhouse creaked as if the land itself was holding its breath. Then silence. He sat there for a moment, heart racing in his chest, sweat clinging to the back of his neck. The twin suns weren't up yet, but a sickly purple light hung low over the horizon like a bruise in the sky. Something was wrong. Pulling on his boots, Kale moved quickly through the house, grabbing the old service rifle he hadn't touched in 3 years. He told himself it was probably a weather surge, a magnetic storm, some leftover ripple from a mining core deeper underground. But deep inside something stirred. A memory, too quiet to form into thought, too loud to ignore. He threw open the front door and froze. The barn was glowing, not on fire, not sparking, just glowing. A low, steady pulse of green light throbbed from inside the wooden walls. Not natural, not mechanical. Something else, something alive. Kale moved fast, gun raised but not aimed, boots kicking dust and grain as he reached the barn doors. He stopped just short of the handle. His pulse slowed. He could hear humming. A tune he didn't know, sung in a voice that barely touched the air. He opened the door slowly. Inside, Lira stood in the center of the barn. Her back was to him. Arms raised slightly, palms facing outward. Dozens of tiny floating shards, crystal fragments he didn't even know existed, hovered around her. Suspended in perfect silence, the humming grew louder. Her skin glowed faintly now, veins traced with light. Not bright enough to blind, but enough to make the dust in the air shimmer like stars. "Lira," he said softly. She flinched and everything collapsed. The light vanished. The shards clattered to the floor. She spun around, breath ragged, eyes wide, not with fear, not with guilt, with exhaustion. Like something inside her had just been ripped open and hastily sealed shut. "I can explain," she said quickly. Kale lowered the gun, slowly, carefully. "Start with what the hell that was." She looked down at her hands, still faintly glowing. "I was trying to contain the storm." "What storm?" "The one that passed overhead. The one that wasn't supposed to reach this far. It's attracted to residual energy, old tech buried in soil. I didn't know there'd be any here." "There isn't." Her eyes met his. "Yes, Kale." "There is." He stepped back. "How would you even know that?" "Because I can hear it. The hum. The pulse beneath the ground. I was born to listen to it." She moved past him and crouched near the corner of the barn, brushing aside loose hay. Beneath it, embedded deep in the earth, a dull red crystal throbbed like a slow heartbeat. "This is from Thalidra," she whispered. "My home. I thought they were all gone." He stared, the rifle forgotten in his hands. "How did it get here?" She ran a trembling finger over the crystal's surface. "Someone brought it. Someone who wanted to bury what we were. What we made." Kale didn't respond. Couldn't. Lira stood. "I didn't come here just to survive. I came because I was following the sound, and it led me here." Her voice cracked. You have a piece of my world buried in your land." The next morning, the skies returned to normal. The suns rose, casting warm gold across the fields like always. But everything had changed. Kale made breakfast. Lira didn't come inside. She was outside, kneeling beside the unearthed crystal, whispering to it in a language that felt older than the dirt itself. He joined her mid-morning, 2 cups of root tea in hand. He didn't speak right away, just sat beside her, offering. Her one. "You're scared," she said, not accusing, just acknowledging. "I'd be stupid not to be. Do you want me to leave?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he set the cup down between them and said, "You told me your world was gone." "It is. Then maybe," he said quietly, "this one can be something new." She looked at him for a long time. Then, finally, she nodded. "I'll show you," she said. "But if I show you everything, you can't unsee it. Then don't hold back." That night, she moved into the house, not as a guest, not as a worker, but as something Kale didn't yet have a name for. The days that followed passed not in peace, but in fragile equilibrium. Lira no longer slept in the barn. She moved into the guest room with nothing but a folded shirt, a dull knife wrapped in leather, and a small satchel of what she called shard. Seeds, crystal fragments that shimmered faintly when touched by moonlight. Kale made no comment when she brought them into the house, though he watched how carefully she placed them on the windowsill, how reverently she checked their alignment each morning. The red crystal buried beneath the barn remained untouched for now. Kale had covered it again with a tarp and a layer of earth, but some part of him could still feel its pulse beneath the soil. Not in sound or vibration, but in atmosphere. Like the land itself had begun to breathe differently. Lira continued working the fields, repairing irrigation nodes and patching fences. But now she moved with a kind of tension, like she was waiting for something to fall from the sky. Kale felt it too. The air had shifted. Not heavier, not louder, just more aware. On the third evening, as twilight bled into violet, Kale found Lira on the porch, sharpening her knife. She worked in silence, the rhythmic scraping of steel against stone echoing through the stillness. "You ever use that?" he asked, stepping outside with 2 cups of bitter tea. She didn't look up. "Once." He handed her a cup and leaned against the railing. "You said you followed the sound, that it led you here. But sounds don't travel through space." She stopped sharpening and looked at him, amber eyes catching the last of the light. "Not sound the way you understand it," she said. "Not vibration, resonance. Explain." She traced a line in the wood with her thumb. "Our crystals, they carry more than memory. They hold frequency, identity. When something we made is disturbed, when it awakens, it sends a call. Not a message, a feeling. And if you're tuned to it, you follow." Kale took a long sip of tea. "So this farm, it called to you?" "Not the farm." Her voice dropped. "Something under it." He didn't ask why that scared him more than anything else she'd said. That night, after she went to bed, Kale sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the map etched into his grandfather's old grain ledger. The land had been in his family for generations, but no one had ever spoken of foreign crystals or buried signals. Yet here it was thriving land, golden wheat, and beneath it, a fragment of a world that was supposed to be lost. He didn't sleep. He sat by the window and waited for the next storm. It came 2 days later, not of wind or rain, but of silence. Everything stopped. The birds, the livestock, even the insects. Kale stepped outside and felt the pressure immediately, like walking into a vacuum. Above, the sky shimmered, not with lightning, but with distortion. The stars bent slightly, unnaturally. Light twisted around something invisible. "They're here," Lira said behind him, her voice hollow. "Who?" She stepped forward, wrapping her arms tightly around her chest. The ones who came after the fall. The ones who took our technology and twisted it into weapons. How would they find you here? She pointed to the barn. Because we stirred the crystal. And it sang too loud. No sooner had she spoken than a beam of pale blue light split the horizon, flickering just above the treetops. Then another. Then a third. Kale turned to run inside to grab the rifle, but Lira caught his arm. "Don't," she said. "Your weapons can't stop what's coming." "What then?" "We run." "To where?" Her eyes were blazing now, not with fear but with certainty, to the heart of the crystal. They sprinted for the barn. Behind them, the sky opened with a quiet hum. Not thunder. Not engines. A chorus. Voices without mouths. Instruments without strings. When they reached the crystal, Lira dropped to her knees and slammed both hands into the earth. "You said you'd show me everything," Kale said, panting. "Then see." She whispered. The ground exploded in light. The barn vanished. The air bent. And Kale saw. Not with his eyes, but with something older. He saw her world. The city of Thalidra. Towers made of singing stone. Children learning resonance the way humans learn math. He saw a world in harmony, broken not by nature, but by conquest. And he saw her. Younger, stronger, brighter. Leading the resistance that failed. Kale fell backward, gasping. The vision faded. The barn returned. The light dimmed. Lira was still, kneeling, tears running silently down her cheeks. "Now you know," she whispered. "What I was, what I lost, what they're coming for." Kale stepped forward and knelt beside her. "Then let them come," he said. "But they're not taking you." She looked at him, blinking. "Why would you fight for me?" He reached out and took her hand. "Because you're not just a voice in the dark anymore. You're part of my land, my story, my fight." Her fingers tightened around his. And somewhere beneath them, the red crystal pulsed again. This time, not alone. Kale had always thought of himself as a man who lived close to the ground. He trusted the way soil smelled before rain. He could feel changes in the air before the weather turned. He knew how grain bent in wind when it was ready to harvest. But nothing could have prepared him for the weight of silence that settled over the land. After the crystal bloomed. For the next 2 days, it didn't rain. The sky didn't clear. The clouds just hovered, gray and unmoving, as if the planet itself was waiting. Lira didn't leave the barn. She spent her time in the center of the structure, surrounded by the red crystal's light. She didn't eat, barely spoke. Her hands moved in deliberate patterns, fingers tracing runes in the air, weaving strands of something unseen. Kale watched from a distance, unsure whether she was building something or holding something back. When he finally entered on the third morning, the temperature dropped 5 degrees as soon as he stepped inside. Lira was pale. Not weak, just dimmed, like a candle flickering low but stubborn. "You've seen what I was," she said without looking at him. "You should decide what I am now." "You're someone I trust," Kale said. "That hasn't changed." She turned to him, slowly. "But you don't understand what this crystal really is." "Then explain it to me." She stood, every movement slower now, as though gravity was testing her. "This crystal is a core fragment," she said. "One of 7 seeded across the Kiva fringe worlds before the fall. Each holds a pattern of Thalidra's resonance, a memory of our culture, our people, our way of balance. But this one wasn't left. It was taken. Taken by who? By the extractors, humans, scientists from your inner systems. They stripped Thalidra for tech, for data. Not to learn, but to sell. They shattered our crystal towers and sold the pieces to the highest bidder. This one was used as a prototype, a weapon seed. Kale's stomach dropped. What kind of weapon? Lira hesitated. Resonance inversion. a harmonic collapse that tears apart any structure tuned to our frequencies, buildings, minds, memories. You're saying it kills your people. It erases us, she said, like we never sang, never lived. Kale stepped back, suddenly aware of the red glow at his feet. And it's under my land? It's awake under your land. That night, the first scout drone arrived. It wasn't large, no bigger than a crow, but it hummed with eerie precision as it hovered above the field, its scanner array glowing violet in the dark. Kale spotted it from the porch and raised his rifle. Don't shoot it, Lira warned, appearing beside him. Why not? Because it's not alone. If we damage it, the whole swarm will come. They're watching, measuring. So we wait? We prepare. By morning, Kale had pulled every salvageable part from his shed-old cum relays, battery coils, a long-dead tractor's motion stabilizer. Lira examined them with a practiced eye, fingers brushing each piece like an artist checking. Canvas. These will do, she said. But we'll need the resonator. The what? The Thari signal harp, she said. It harmonizes the local field, balances resonance. If we build one, we can mask the core's signal long enough to hide it. You mean? You want to hide the crystal? I want to rewrite its song. Kale raised an eyebrow. You can do that? She looked at him, her voice flat. I'm the one who invented it. The next 3 days were a blur of heat, metal, and tension. They worked. Through the nights, piecing together Lira's makeshift resonator, a crescent-shaped frame of steel and crystal that pulsed when calibrated just right. Lira guided Kale's hands as he soldered unfamiliar components. Her touch electric, her breath steady against his ear. They moved like one. On the 4th night, they tested it. The moment Lira strummed the harp's tuning wires, the air changed. Kale couldn't hear anything, no hum, no pitch, but the stars above them pulsed brighter for an instant, like someone had drawn back a curtain across the sky. It's working, Lira said. But not for long. Just then, they heard it. A low whine, rising, shrill, metallic. The drone returned, but it wasn't alone this time. 10. Maybe 12 of them hovered at the edge of the field, glowing in formation like a constellation descending to Earth. And behind them, silhouetted against the twin moons, was a sleek dropship with black plating and no insignia. They're here, Lira whispered. What do they want? Kale asked. Me, the core. Or both. And if we refuse? Lira's jaw tightened. Then they'll take the whole valley. The ground beneath them vibrated softly, the crystal humming through the soil, responding to the tension in the air. Kale reached for her hand. Then we don't refuse, he said. We fight. She didn't smile, didn't nod. She just held tighter. And together, beneath the humming stars, they stepped forward into the field. 2 figures against the unknown. The farmer. The fugitive, and the silence between them, filled with one unspoken vow they would not be erased. The dropship landed without a sound. No engine roar, no dust plume, just a gentle descent, as if gravity itself had surrendered. It touched down on the far edge of Kale's wheat fields, its black hull gleaming under the twin moons like obsidian, dipped in oil. The drones flanked it in a tight arc, their violet lights casting eerie reflections over the golden grain. Nothing about it felt like a military operation. This was surgical. Measured. A scalpel, not a hammer. Kale stood beside Lira near the barn, rifle across his back, heart hammering in his chest like it was trying to warn him. The resonator on the roof still thrummed quietly, its chords tuned to suppress the crystal's frequency, but already he could feel resistance in the air, like the silence was fighting back. How long can it hold? He asked. Lira single quotes S eyes didn't leave the ship. Not long. Once they breach the masking field, the core will light up like a beacon. And then? Then they'll tear through us like we're paper. Kale exhaled slowly. So we stopped them before that. The ship's hatch hissed open. A long ramp extended, touching the soil like a tongue tasting the earth. One figure emerged. Not armored. Not armed. Dressed in a sleek gray suit that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. The figure moved like a diplomat but carried themselves like a predator. Tall, pale, eyes silver, not with age, but with enhancement. Kale had seen that gaze before, in generals, in warlords. In people who had traded empathy for certainty. The figure stopped 20 paces from them, hands visible, posture casual. "You've done well hiding it," they said, voice like static wrapped in silk. The signature was faint, impressive. Lira stepped forward. "It's not yours." The figure smiled politely. "Everything becomes ours, eventually." "You knew what?" "It was when you took it," she snapped. "You fractured the core, corrupted it, tried to weaponize something meant to heal. And yet here you are," the figure said, tilting their head, "standing on ground that doesn't belong to you, sheltering a piece of a dead civilization. Better, a dead civilization," Kale said, "than a live one that feeds on the corpses of others." The figure's smile didn't falter. "Ah, the farmer speaks." They turned slightly, addressing Kale now. "Do you even know what she is? What she's capable of?" "I've seen enough." "Have you?" The figure's tone sharpened. "Have you seen the facility on Belfast Prime where her designs melted? The minds of 300 researchers? The refugee station that imploded under harmonic collapse after one of her so-called resonance tools activated in sleep mode?" Lira flinched. Kale turned to her, but she looked away. "Those weren't weapons," she whispered. "They were memory anchors. They were meant to preserve our language, our history. But they became something else," the figure said, voice almost gentle now. "Because your people never understood containment. You create things that feel, that respond, and in the wrong hands, or even the right ones, they don't just echo. They scream." The drones began to move, slowly, forming a perimeter. Kale gripped his rifle. "What do you want?" "What we always wanted," the figure said. "Access to the core, and her." "No," Kale said. "You're not taking her. It's not your choice." A shrill hum split the air. The resonator on the barn roof cracked literally. A glowing fissure ran down its central arc. The field began to flicker. The crystal under the barn responded with a sudden pulse, sending tremors through the earth. "They're pushing it too hard," Lira gasped. "The core's destabilizing. What happens if it collapses?" Kale asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "It'll take everything within 5 kilometers. Field inversion. Total harmonic erasure. Not just structures. Not just machines. People?" She nodded. Kale turned to the figure. "You'll destroy everything just to get it?" "Collateral is acceptable," they said. "Not to me." Kale grabbed Lira's hand and ran. They ducked behind the silo just as the first drone fired. A pulse bolt vaporized a chunk of fencing where they'd been standing. Lira twisted her wrist and flung one of her shard seeds into the air. It hovered mid-flight, then exploded in a wave of soundless light, dropping 3 drones instantly. "You could have done that before?" Kale shouted as they ran. "Not without triggering the core," she shouted back. "But if it's destabilizing anyway, then we fight." They made it to the barn. The crystal inside was pulsing wildly now, throwing off waves of invisible pressure. Tools shook off shelves. Nails ripped from wood. The structure groaned like it was alive. "We have to harmonize it again," Lira said. "Bring it back to balance." "How?" "With me, but I need your help." "It won't trust me alone. I made it. I broke it." Kale grabbed her shoulders. "And let's fix it together." They knelt on either side of the core. Lira extended her hands. Kale did. The same. Their fingertips met above the pulsing red surface. Light erupted. Not blinding but total. Kale felt his mind stretch, then split. Not in pain but in memory, he saw her people. Their downfall. Their hope. He saw himself, not as a soldier. Not even as a farmer, but as a bridge. He understood the frequencies now. The way Lira felt sound, not just heard it. The way the core pulsed like a heart looking for rhythm. He matched her hum. Beat by beat. Note by note. Outside, the drones faltered. The dropship began to shake. The figures stumbled. They're stabilizing. Someone screamed. Cut the feed. Collapse the field. But it was too late. The core stopped pulsing. And started singing. A pure note rose into the air so clear, so sharp that even the sky held still. The drones dropped. The ship's engines flared and sputtered, then died. The figure fell to their knees, clutching their head, and then silence again. A different kind, not absence, but peace. Lira opened her eyes. Kale was still holding her hands. The red crystal glowed a soft gold now. We did it, she breathed. Not we, Kale said. You? Outside, the grass was still. The night was calm. The threat was gone. For now. But something deeper had awakened. Not in the crystal. In them. The aftermath didn't come in fire or fury, but in stillness. The kind of stillness that settles after a storm so powerful the land itself forgets how to breathe. The drones lay scattered across the field like broken teeth, their glowing cores dark. The dropship's engines were cold, its surface pitted where harmonic shock waves had warped the alloy into crumpled ribbons. The silver-eyed figure who had once seemed invincible was now on their back in the wheat, unmoving, eyes open, but empty. Not dead, but disconnected. As if the crystal's final song had shattered more than machines. Kale stood beside Lira in the doorway of the barn, watching the wind move gently through the stalks of grain once more. Behind them, the red crystal no longer pulsed. It shimmered. Quiet and whole, no longer a weapon, not a beacon. Just a memory, sealed in resonance. They'll come again, he said softly. Lira nodded. They always do. But this time, Kale added, they'll find a farm guarded by something. More than just fences. She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward and placed her hand on the crystal's smooth surface. It glowed briefly under her touch and then dimmed into stillness. Not asleep content. I can bury it now, she said. It's balanced. It won't sing anymore unless someone tries to twist it again. Kale raised an eyebrow. Won't that make it harder to use if we ever need it? She smiled faintly. No, it'll remember us. They buried it the next day. Not deep. Just beneath a bed of black soil and woven wheat roots. They placed a marker, not a warning, but a promise. A curved shard Lira had shaped with her own hands, etched in both Thari script and human standard. What was broken, we healed together. Weeks passed. No ships came. No more drones. The stars held their distance. Lira moved fully into the house. The barn returned to its former life, housing tools and livestock instead of secrets and world-ending artifacts. The resonator, now deactivated, sat on the porch like a sculpture, rusted, bent, but beautiful in its own way. And Kale? He changed too. Shoulders sat lighter. He laughed more often. He stopped sleeping with his rifle within reach. Not because he stopped expecting trouble, but because he'd finally stopped waiting for it. One night, after a long day tending the expanded fields, Kale found Lira on the porch, fingers brushing over a stringless harp she had built from old wires and leftover crystal fragments. She wasn't playing, not really, just listening. You miss it? He asked. She shook her head. I mourn it, but I don't miss it. He sat beside her. I still don't know what to call you sometimes. She turned to him, amused. What do you mean? You're not just Lira of Felidra anymore. Not just a scientist or a fugitive, or someone the galaxy forgot. You're more. So are you, she said. You're not just a farmer or a soldier who walked away. He thought for a moment, then said, Then maybe we name ourselves. She raised an eyebrow. And what name would you give me? Mine, he said, quiet but certain. She didn't laugh. She didn't need to. She simply leaned over and kissed him. Slow, complete, like the sky settling into night. They married a week later. No ceremony, no guests. Just two people standing under the twin suns, with the crystal fields humming softly behind them and the earth alive beneath their feet. They built more after that. More fences. More crops. More rooms for refugees who began to find their way there. Thari, human, others too, drawn not by signals but by rumors. Stories of a place where people weren't judged by the world they came from, but by the world they helped build. Some brought seeds. Some brought skills. Some just brought grief. They didn't want to carry alone anymore. Kale and Lira welcomed them all. They taught them to farm. To listen. To heal. One day, years later, a young Thari girl stood at the base of the field, looking up at the stars. Is it true? She asked Kale. You helped save her crystal? He knelt beside her. We saved each other. But you're not Thari. No, he said with a smile. But love doesn't need matching skin or shared blood. It just needs soil. And time. And a reason. What was your reason? He looked over his shoulder at Lira, who was laughing, as she spun in the weed with two human children clinging to her sleeves. Her stomach hurt, he said quietly. And all she asked for was work, the child blinked. That doesn't sound like the beginning of a legend. Maybe not, Kale replied, but it was the beginning of everything. As the sun set, the golden fields whispered with wind, and somewhere far beneath the earth, the crystal remained silent. Not forgotten. Not buried. Home.